Welcome to the pre-disruptive innovation period from 78 to 1980. So I was 21 when I joined IIM Ahmedabad. And this is the fifth series in the block from 1957 to 1985. So we have just 2 or 3 sessions left to go before this block gets over. So when I joined IIM Ahmedabad, it was pretty amazing that out of the 180 people who were there in our batch, this was the batch of 1978, there were 2 Sanjay Bhargavs. Now Sanjay was a very, very common name. So in my school, among 50 people, there were 7 people who were called Sanjay. So, so Sanjay, there being another Sanjay, or maybe 4 or 5 Sanjays or 10 Sanjays out of 180 was not that unusual. But having 2 people with exactly the same first name and second name was quite unusual. And IIM Ahmedabad had to figure out how to distinguish us, and then they put our roll numbers next to our names. So that's how they distinguished us. But later on, the 2 of us and the other Sanjay Bhargav had gone to IIT Kanpur and then joined IIM Ahmedabad. So I had gone to IIT Bombay. So at various points in time, even after I got engaged to Anita, she would tell me, oh, I met this person who says he knows Sanjay Bhargav very well. And it turned out he was talking about the other Sanjay Bhargav. So I had to explain all this to Anita, who was quite suspicious. But anyway, so there were 2 of us. And since I was very thin, my batchmates called me Thin Sanjay, and the other Sanjay was just called Sanjay, because he wasn't terribly fat. But anyway, so this went on. Now, one of the things that we soon discovered in IIM Ahmedabad, and I should talk a little bit about IIM Ahmedabad at that time, because it was a fairly unique institution and very different from IIT Bombay. Because what I found in IIM Ahmedabad was that the professors who were there, they were really committed to the institution. So the institution had been started by Harvard. It followed the case study method. I think some of the professors who were teaching there had studied in the US. But they were really committed to making this school the premier management institution in India. And the quality of the faculty was just outstanding for most part. Now, of course, the quality of the students, because again, it was a competitive thing, was pretty outstanding. But it was probably, at least at that time, not that hard to get into IIM as it was to get into IIT. It was still hard. And IIM Ahmedabad particularly hard, because there clearly was a hierarchy with Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta. And at that time, Bangalore was just emerging, and Calcutta was clearly way behind Ahmedabad. So IIM Ahmedabad was the premier management institution. A very nice campus designed by Louis Kahn, quite unusual, a little dysfunctional because it didn't sort of cater for the rain that much, but it doesn't rain a lot in Ahmedabad, and the entire campus was quite beautiful there, and our dorm rooms were quite nice. So quite a change from IIT Bombay. So as we landed up, one of the things that they threw at us, and we soon had to develop the skill of speed reading, was we would get around 200 pages to prepare for, to read before the next day started. And I think the initial attempt was to deflate egos. So they started off with like a test where most of the people got an F grade, some got Ds and things like that. So again, both in IIT and IIM, what used to happen was that there were quite a few people who would come who were doing very well wherever they were. And suddenly they were put together with people who were also doing very well, and they might end up at the bottom of the class. And this caused a lot of anxiety in IIT, not so much in IIM because I guess people were a little older, but in IITs, there were often suicides because people just couldn't deal with the fact that they used to be at the top and now they were at the bottom and weren't being able to cope. So once we started adjusting to the pace at IIM Ahmedabad, I just loved it because for me, it was very clear that the fit for me in management or business school was much, much higher than it was in engineering. And there is a little story behind this. My father was quite progressive, and though sort of career counseling and vocational guidance and so on and so forth was not very prevalent in India at that time, there was a lady called Mehru Bengali who was probably the only sort of career counselor, and she had a really good series of tests, including things like the Rorschach in blot test and so on, so forth, that she made people go through. And after I went through all those tests, she basically said that, I was quite gifted. I would do well in most professions, but, my spatial ability or visual ability was a little low. And therefore, I would do better in things like finance and accounting rather than engineering. Now, my father, of course, had his heart set on my going into IIT. So he, while he took me for this, he disregarded the advice and told me to go into IIT or science or whatever, and not into something like economics or whatever. But it so turned out that I ended up in management school. And the other thing that I liked a lot, because this was a difference between, say, Ahmedabad and Calcutta, that in Calcutta, there was much more instruction and teaching of various methods, lectures, and so on and so forth, while there was relatively less of that in IIM Ahmedabad. And the idea was to be much more applied and learn from case studies, which would also illustrate certain concepts which could be used. So I, again, loved the case study method rather than the lecture method. And because I was really enjoying what I was doing, I also ended up doing very well. And there were these things called industrial scholarships, which were set up by certain companies, which essentially paid your tuition and things. So, like I said, my father didn't pay for my college. So these industrial scholarships helped, and the balance I managed to get from my bridge winnings or through other methods, whatever. One of the courses which I didn't do very well at, and I still struggle with, it was this thing called written analysis and communication. So I was never very good at communication. This was a course I didn't do very well at. It was stressed a lot at IIM Ahmedabad. But unfortunately, I didn't really have a knack for it. Gradually, because of the course, I improved a little bit, but still, it was one of my weaker things. In the second year at IIM Ahmedabad, things get pretty nice. You can do a fair number of electives. The course load drops, and we've made it drop even further. A friend of mine called Vipul Jain and me, because we ended up doing a course of independent study together. Now, Vipul and I were both gold medalists at IIM Ahmedabad. So we enjoyed working together, and we worked on a project which kind of studied how the Tatas and Birlas, which were two of the leading industrial groups in India at that time, how they had grown and what were the approaches that they had taken for growth, and studied that, what were the kind of companies they had and things. Later on, of course, both of us ended up joining the Tatas, so it was quite interesting. And this course of independent study showed us that the Birlas had grown by manipulating a lot of the industrial policy, while the Tatas had grown in a much more ethical fashion. So also after the first year, when you were just allotted norms based on whatever method, in the second year, you could change your dorm and get together with some of your friends and so on and so forth. So I was part of dorm 7, which was supposed to be the cool dorm. We had a fair number of the people who were doing really well. And we kind of hung out together. And both Vipul and I were not the people who worked the hardest. Especially Vipul, he would sometimes even bunk classes and all, but he ended up doing the best out of all of us, because even with the gold medalists, though there were 3 awarded, Vipul was ahead of the other 2, and the other 2, Sridhar and I, were quite close in terms of our scores. Now, for relaxation, unlike IIT Mumbai, which was very far from the city, and is still reasonably far, like Powai is quite far from Mumbai. But in Ahmedabad, this place, Vastrapur, was far. It was the outskirts of Ahmedabad at that time. Now it's no longer the outskirts, it's very much in the city. But even then, it was fairly close. And there was a place called Law Gardens where we could go and get food and stuff like that. Right outside, very late at night, maybe even at 2 o'clock, we could go and get omelets, which were made on a kerosene stove and had a little bit of the kerosene taste. In them, but we quite liked them, and we got tea and omelets, and that was a lot of fun. There were dorm competitions, like the dorms competed against each other in various things, like cricket, bridge, chess, and so on and so forth. So I was quite active in that. Now, the benefits of going to the management school, or IIM Ahmedabad, was one, of course, we published a little bit of our monograph, our course of independent study. I got the gold medal, which is like a badge of honor, which still stands today. After so many years, if you say you were a gold medalist from IIM Ahmedabad, it does count for something. And we also built a network. The network was primarily India-based, though some of the people, at least 20%, 30% of the batch, went overseas. And we had a pretty good network. Now, these kind of benefits, especially the network benefits, even today, are one of the main benefits of going to a top-notch business school. The costs in Ahmedabad, IIM Ahmedabad, compared to business costs, business school costs today were really, really very, very, very low. They were subsidized in some fashion by the government. And then, of course, I got industrial scholarships, which helped even defray that. But even accounting for inflation and various other things, the costs were in no way comparable to the amounts that you spend in India, and certainly not comparable to that you spend in the US. So now, whether going to a management school is a good decision or not has become much more debatable than when it was at that particular point in time. So one of the things that our batch sort of became notorious for was that once the last assignment had been done on back, we had to put all these assignments into a box um, on Sunday midnight, and then the box was collected and then graded. So when the last assignment was done, then after that, we decided that just before graduation, we were going to burn our back assignments and put them in this box. And then someone got the bright idea of carrying this box like a dead body and putting it on the desk of the professor who used to grade these assignments. Now, it so happened that some of the embers were still smoldering in that box, and someone put on the fan, which sort of fanned these embers, and there was a little bit of a fire in this professor's room, and quite a bit of things got destroyed. And then later on, there was going to be a big inquiry, but the students sort of stood together, and like the student representative, who was like Arun Bakru, was asked as to name the students who were involved, but he said no, it was a collective responsibility, and we all stood by that because we didn't want the people who did this to get into trouble, get their degrees rescinded or something like that, and we felt that they won't be able to rescind the degrees of the whole batch. But I don't really remember what was the punishment that was given to us. But we were a little wild at that time. We were also very arrogant because, by then, IIM Ahmedabad, the top companies in India had sort of recognized the value of the people coming out of IIM Ahmedabad. And there was quite a rush to try and get graduates. So we were in a sort of bargaining position and a little arrogant. But anyway, getting into the Tata Administrative Service was still very difficult. And the whole interview process was extremely involved process, but I managed to get into TAS. I interviewed with quite a few, including Citibank, but turned Citibank down because TAS was considered to be the number one job, and like Citibank paid better than Tata Administrative Service, but it was supposed to be a foreign bank, and we were supposed to be not doing much and just being paid a lot and acting like a glorified clerk. At least that was the feedback at that time. So, quite a few of us preferred TAS to the Citibank. Now, on the TAS interview, there was an interesting story. We had to go through many rounds, and people got sent back at various rounds. If you made it to one round, you had to go and eat with some of the directors at the Taj Hotel, where they assessed you on your table manners and so on and so forth. So it was a pretty involved process, maybe 7 or 8 or 10 interviews. And one of the interviews had this situation, which was called the chairman situation, where you were on the board and you took turns being board members of the chairman, and a topic was put up which you were going to discuss at the board. And there were observers seeing how the chairman conducted the board meeting and how the board members. So in our case, when in one of the sessions, the chairman was given a topic saying, cities are getting congested. So to relieve congestion, some of the cities should think about satellite cities. And we should, as a company, back the idea of satellite cities. So this was going to be discussed in the board. Now, unfortunately, this chairman thought satellite cities were out in space and not next to the congested city. So while we were trying to drag this person down to earth, the discussion veered off into space, and it became a very interesting discussion. And this chairman sort of didn't get it. And though we were trying quite hard, but he kept insisting. And, unfortunately, because of that, he was not asked to come back for the next round. And of course, we had a good laugh on that. And so, unfortunate things can happen. So I don't know if that person would, if he had got another topic, whether he would have made it or not, but this certainly killed the deal for him. So that's all for this session, and the story will continue in the next session. Thank you very much for listening to me.